Hello everyone, and welcome to the Student Sparks podcast, where naturopathy meets neuroscience. I'm Parker Malev, the naturopath.
And I'm Emma Johnson, the neuroscientist. Join us on this adventure as we delve into the depths of nutrition, nature, medicine, and the mind,
where every insight sparks discussion and debate. Hey guys, what's up? Today we are talking about that really annoying plant that you always see in weed killer commercials. You guessed it, it's the little yellow flower that turns into little things that we all blow and make wishes on as children for some reason. Don't know where that came from, but yeah, you guessed it, it's dandelions. Did you know that dandelions could actually be one of the most nutritious green vegetables that you could be consuming on a daily basis? There's a bit of a weird prejudice against dandelions because they're considered weeds, and there's so many other plants that grow in our yards and such that are considered weeds. But dandelions are actually more nutritious than any kind of lettuce or spinach. And today we're going to look into some of the different uses for this plant that have been demonstrated in science. So today we're going to be using an article from Nutrition Reviews as an outline to follow to look into the dandelion and some of its chemistry. Nutrition Reviews is a leading peer-reviewed journal that's dedicated to the publication of authoritative literature and reviews that analyze and synthesize existing and emerging knowledge in the field of nutrition science. So this is a pretty established source from a group of scientists who looked into it's basically a meta-analysis of the different studies on dandelions. So first things first, I kind of want to just say that a dandelion is a food. Yes, it's called a weed, and I think it's called a weed because it's pretty difficult to kill. Its roots are super, super strong and super established, and they will spread. That's why you can look out into an unestablished field, and it's just yellow. It's just straight yellow. It's all dandelions in that field. And that's probably why they're considered weeds, and a lot of landscapers obviously don't like them because they are so hard to kill. And if they don't want things there, then, well, too bad. These suckers are staying. So it's kind of weird to hear somebody say, oh yes, dandelions are a food, although the whole thing can be eaten. In grocery stores, it's more common to find the dandelion greens, the leaves being sold, not exactly the flowers or the roots. But the difficulty with dandelion greens is that they're really, really bitter, and so not a lot of people really enjoy them very much, because it's kind of like arugula, where like some people really like the bitter, funky taste of it, but for arugula, so my dad doesn't really care for arugula, but my mom loves it. So it's kind of one of those things where, yeah, it's really good for you. We all know it's really good for you, but it can be kind of funky. We just need to get rid of the association of weeds with things that are not useful or they don't have any value because they're weeds. That's just not true. Just because it's not sold in a grocery store doesn't mean that it's not valuable. One of the most common forms that you can find dandelion in is actually roasted and made into a coffee alternative, or just a tea. So, I mean, if you go down the tea aisle of Walmart, there is going to be dandelion or roasted dandelion root tea. It's really tasty. When it comes to nutrients, dandelion has a higher concentration of unsaturated fats compared to other lettuces or greens. Unsaturated fats are called the good fats. They don't have any negative implications on your health picture. They actually are really, really cardioprotective. They're necessary for cellular respiration and actions and such. So unsaturated fats is the one that is pretty much undoubtedly the good one, the one we need a lot more of. And it has more than any other lettuce and green types that you can get that's, sold in grocery stores. Furthermore, it even has some of the highest sources of beta-carotene found in any green vegetable and is comparable to carrots in a ratio of, 100 grams to 100 gram ratio. It's very comparable. It has a lot of beneficial minerals, which a lot of us don't get much of, to be completely honest, in our normal everyday diet. But it does have a lot of calcium. It has a lot of sodium, magnesium, iron, silicone, copper, phosphorus, zinc, manganese, and is even a great source of potassium. So I know that was a big list of things. You've probably heard most of them before, but they are essential minerals that we need in our day-to-day. And it's hard to get enough of them, so it's best to find food sources that have the highest concentration of them possible, and this is one of them. So as a food, it's a great source of nutrients, and it will be a good replacement for spinach and things, especially because you can find it in your yard, but we'll talk about that later. As for its phytochemistry, meaning its plant chemistry, what it's made up of, when you look at the little chemicals and the molecules that make up this plant, I will actually link a chart of all the compounds that have been studied within dandelions in the description of this episode. So if you're more interested in the more in-depth descriptions of it, you can go down below and check that out while I'm talking about some of them. So each of the different compounds that are found in dandelions are each linked to certain functions within the human body. I'm just going to highlight a few here just to give you an idea of what this plant is actually capable of within the human body. One of them is terpenes. It's a large group of phytochemicals that have been found to be anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial, which means that anti-inflammatory is going to reduce your body's reaction to outside. Like if you're sick, you get inflamed because you have a fever and your body's trying to get rid of those things. That's good, quote unquote, good inflammation. That's acute inflammation. Now, when a product says that it's anti-inflammatory, it can either be acute anti-inflammatory or chronic anti-inflammatory, and this is one of those things that is going to have a good effect on chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation is a huge risk factor and link to a lot of different diseases, whether it be cardiovascular disease or diabetes. Any of those sort of disorders can be linked to a high amount of inflammation. And antimicrobial is going to be anti-bad bacteria, per se. It's going to be protecting from the types of bacteria we don't want in our body. We are all made up of billions and billions of different kinds of bacteria that we want or don't want. So being antimicrobial will help reduce the amount of bad stuff that we have. Another set of compounds that's found within dandelions is phenolic compounds, which is another type of another group of phytochemicals, and these have been found to strengthen your immune response. So again, this is going to be making your immune system a little more powerful, giving it that better kick so it can deal with pathogens more efficiently. So like I said, these are only the larger categories of phytochemicals that have interactions with the human body. But within these groups, there are smaller subsets of yes, these are the terpenes, but there's 10 or 15 different terpenes that are listed in the charts that I'm going to be putting below that each have their own specific action that they may take on the body. The anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial is kind of a big picture of what it is capable of, but each of these smaller compounds have more direct actions on certain systems. So getting into some of the more specific compounds present within dandelions is chicoraic acid. This is a super interesting compound because it has a direct impact on inhibiting the HIV-1 integrase enzyme. And this enzyme is required for the integration of viral DNA within a host for the human immunodeficiency virus. And I feel like most people are familiar with that, but it's associated with AIDS. It's a very deadly viral infection. And chicoraic acid has been demonstrated to not to completely, but to inhibit this enzyme, which lowers the impact that HIV would have on a host. It's also a geroprotector, which means that it can increase lifespan and increase quality of life for a longer period of time. And this has been demonstrated in animals specifically. Another molecule that it has within it is caffeic acid, which has been shown to inhibit cancer cell proliferation. And I'll have links to these studies below. These are both from PubChem. They've been studied in vivo and in vitro, which means in animals and in a lab setting. And there are human studies as well. Those are just not as well documented yet, but they have been demonstrated in a chemistry sense to have impacts. These two molecules have had impacts on HIV and on cancer, and can potentially increase lifespan. So when you look into these specific compounds, you can kind of assume that because dandelion has them in there, and if you understand what those compounds do, then dandelion may have those kind of results on a person. But as we've discussed in the last episode with me, a single molecule is going to have a completely different impact on the body than a whole complex of molecules. It's not like if you were to just chug caffeic acid, it's going to have a little bit different of effect as if you were going to eat a ton of dandelions. So let's look at the whole picture of just using dandelion either in tea form or extract form, however the tests utilize this resource. So we're going to look into the pharmacology. Many of the biological impacts of dandelion have been observed in experimental trials with animals and in the lab, but I'm mainly going to focus on the ones that have been observed and documented in humans because it's a little bit more reliable than what has been done on mice, especially for today's purposes. Studies within animals are great. They give us some good insights and tools, but they're not the same organism. So I like to find the human stuff as much as possible. All right, so as we discussed before, in humans it has been observed to be anti-inflammatory, and specifically this is applied to irritable bowel disease. This is an inflammation of your bowels, your intestines. Since it has been found to be useful in irritable bowel disease, or IBD, that kind of translates into its use for the symptoms of IBD, which would be constipation and diarrhea, intestinal cramping, and it also translates over to chronic colitis, which is very interesting. This is just another manifestation of inflammation in the bowel. So the anti-inflammatory properties seem to translate directly into the human bowel. It also improves symptoms of patients with gastric ulcers, gastric metaplasia, and hyperplasia, which just means an increased number of cells of tissue in a certain area, and that can eventually become cancerous. So it is very efficient or effective in reducing the symptoms of that. It's also a diuretic, which is very interesting because it's used as a coffee substitute a lot of times. So even though it doesn't have that caffeine kick, it's going to have, it's gonna go right through you. The reason for its effects on the GI is likely because of its ability to improve bile production. And those of you who aren't familiar with bile, it's produced by the liver, and it is stored in the gallbladder, and its main job is to be excreted into the duodenum, and it emulsifies and allows fat to be properly transported and absorbed. Without bile, you cannot absorb fat, which can be disastrous. We need fat. I know fat sounds bad, but you need fat for all cell health. Your cell membranes, which are essential to the function of your entire body without exception. Your phospholipid bilayer is what that membrane is called. And if you can hear it in the name, the phospholipid, fat is a part of that compound that's necessary. So without bile, your cell health is going to decline completely, and that can manifest disease in a bunch of different ways, but it can play a large role. And that can be seen on stool tests with the increase of fecal fat in the stool. And since dandelion is able to increase bile health, it can likely decrease the amount of fat that's being excreted, and you can actually absorb better. You need fat also to absorb certain nutrients, so without fat you have the potential to become malnourished. So dandelion could be a really good tool for those who are struggling with bile production and liver health. Interestingly enough, both drugs.com and Mount Sinai, two pretty trusted sources when it comes to drug information, have a list of things that dandelions may interact with, including blood sugar medications and blood thinners, or statin medications. This to me suggests that dandelion, just in a complete inference setting, not scientific study setting, it suggests that dandelions have also been observed to have biological significance in these two areas, in improving blood sugar and lowering blood pressure. Obviously, these two are still being looked into, but if you would like to read what dandelion might interact with below, that'll again be in the description. So when it comes to dosages, this is probably going to be a new area for a lot of people unless you've been having tea. Tea is one of those things where it's kind of hard to have too much of, mainly because most people don't drink more than 2 to 4 cups of tea per day, and that's if they don't drink coffee. If you have never drank tea consistently before, I would suggest starting slow. Like, don't have any more than 1 or 2 cups of tea per day in general. Dandelion's going to be a little bit more gentle because it doesn't have caffeine in it. So if you're looking for a good thing that kind of gives you a warm cup of something feeling, like if you're trying to give up coffee, this is a good way to go. But definitely don't just randomly switch over to drinking 4 cups of dandelion tea instead of your coffee per day, if that makes any sense. There are warnings against consuming dandelion if you have ulcers, but this is because it is recorded to increase stomach acidity, which could actually be very helpful for a lot of people. You have a warm cup of dandelion tea before a meal. It could improve your stomach's hydrochloric acid production, and thus that could be why it interacts with blood glucose medications, because if your stomach is better prepared to deal with a set of food, whether it be high in carbohydrates or not, your body will be able to break it down better and more efficiently process said sugars. So that even though that is considered a warning, I actually think it could be used to our advantage. Then again, this warning is pretty much the same thing that they give you, like if you have heartburn, there's a list of foods on, say, Harvard and Mayo Clinic's website that'll say, hey, avoid these foods if you don't want to feel heartburn, and it's like tomatoes. It falls within that category. Like, it's not unsafe to eat, but it might make you feel uncomfortable if you have a pre-existing issue. There are variations in dosages recommended depending on where you look, but when it comes to tea, it's suggested that you have about 3 to 5 grams of dried tea per day, which is like 2 to 3 tea bags worth. And that's just the documented, this does nothing bad to you kind of thing. And then on the other side, when it comes to tinctures, which is just an extract of this material, it's said to do about 4 to 10 milliliters of a tincture, and you can convert that to drops online, but it's not much. Tinctures are very potent, very strong, so you definitely do not want to drink that as if it were a tea. Tea, I'm lenient with. Tinctures, definitely look it up online and calculate it based on both your needs, your gender, your weight, those kind of things. So just be careful with tinctures, especially if you're pregnant. None of this information applies to if you're pregnant. I have no confidence in telling pregnant women that they can or cannot have this, because that's not in my area of understanding. So this information is for anybody who is not pregnant and not under the age of like 12. Other than that, dandelions are super safe. You can pluck them out of the yard and eat them. And that segues perfectly into where to find them. My favorite source for dried teas right now is actually on Amazon. It's Frontier Co-op. They have ethically sourced dried herbs in bulk for a very reasonable price. It's USDA organic. I can link that below as well if you're interested in buying. I'm not brand loyal. This is what I can afford, and I like their credentials. You could definitely shop around. There are options to not buy in bulk, but let's look at some of the math behind versus, buying a little box of tea versus buying a bulk bag. If you're buying tea packets from the store or anywhere else in a normal grocery setting, dandelion root tea and most of the boxes of tea are going to be about $3 to $5 per box. The average amount of tea in each bag varies slightly, but it's about 2 grams, according to a few online blogs. It's a little bit hard to pinpoint that number considering the variance in amount in production of tea, but usually it's about 2 grams. The dandelion tea that I used to buy at Walmart was $4 per box, and this is all these numbers are organic. That's always going to be cheaper to buy non-organic, but I 100% think it is more ethically produced if it's organic, for environment's sake and for ecology's sake in general, not even talking about the health impacts of it, but that's a whole nother discussion again. So this tea that I usually get at Walmart is about $4 per box, and it had 16 tea bags in it, which is about 16 cups of tea. So 16 times 2 grams is 32 grams of tea in each box. So you're paying $4 for 32 grams. 1 ounce is about 28 grams, so our 23-gram box of tea is 1.12 ounces. That's not very much. You're paying $4 per ounce, essentially. So in bulk, this tea costs about $1.40 per ounce, respectively, depending on the source, of course. I'm using my Frontier Co-op prices as my baseline here, so just all you have to do is look. It will usually in bulk give you a price per ounce, so that's going to be your reference number for this equation that I'm doing. I love math. I don't. Anyways, so the comparison here is that you're getting 1 ounce of tea for $4 at your normal Walmart, and then you're getting 1 ounce of bulk tea for $1.40. Now, there are some discrepancies with what you can afford up front. Obviously, it is about $15 to $20 for a 1-pound bag of dandelion tea. I just recently bought a 2-pound bag of mint tea, which I can definitely talk about some other time, but that was $15 and I got 2 pounds of it. And when I tell you that this bag is absolutely massive and will probably last me 6 months to a year, I am not kidding. And I drink my tea so strong. If you can afford this upfront purchase, it is definitely worth it in the long run, because I could only get 3 boxes of tea. That's 3 ounces compared to 32 ounces that I got for the same price. It makes a world of difference, and the tea is still great. I almost feel like it has more flavor because of the loose leaf nature of it. That's definitely up to you. I just think this is a good option and a way to go if you really want to integrate some of these medicinal herbs into your life. All right, so there are a few things that you can take away from this information that I've laid out today. Option 1, you can go to your local health food store, like Whole Foods or maybe Trader Joe's, and buy your dandelion greens in a big old bushel the same way you would buy a head of lettuce, getting tons of extra nutrients and phytochemicals compared to the average lettuce, which is fine, but the cons of this is that it's not easily accessible. It's kind of hard to find, and let's just be honest, Whole Foods and Trader Joe's are not exactly the most affordable options, and it might take some searching to actually find these greens. Option 2, you can buy individual or bulk dried tea leaves online or at a local store, Walmart, whatever, and enjoy a delicious herbal tea every morning, evening, and night. There may be some discrepancies here on how much nutrients you actually get from the dried herbs, but it's, especially since you're not eating them, you're just drinking the steeped water, but you'll get all the water-soluble vitamins in that tea, which is great. You just might not get the fat-soluble vitamins, but you will still get some of the phenolic compounds and such. So it's, it's a give and take sort of thing. But if you want something to level up your salad game or your sauteed greens, then definitely, you don't want to saute dried greens. I don't know, that would be gross. Anyways, you can, I don't know, you do you, I guess. Or option 3, which is my personal favorite, you can go out to your yard or a neighbor's yard come springtime and harvest your own little crop, most likely for free. This option is 100% my favorite, but there's a big but with this one. Please make sure that you research some foraging tips and safety procedures before doing anything like that, because there are a few rules that should be followed to make sure that A, the plant you're picking is the right one and that it's safe, and B, that there are no contaminants. Like, you cannot forage within, I believe, is 100 feet of a road, a busy road especially, or a yard that has been sprayed with pesticides. That's not safe. Especially if you're foraging at a neighbor's yard, you need to know, do you spray your yard? Even if it's with organic pesticides, you gotta know. And this is with dandelions, since they're pretty easily identifiable, it's not really a big issue, but they're definitely the most common victims of weed killer. So don't pick at any corporate buildings or businesses and such, because they be spraying. So just for erring on the side of caution, my recommendation with this is just, if you know your yard and you have dandelions here, go for that. Just stick with what you have and what you understand fully. If you're more confident in your foraging, then you can branch out. Even more importantly, actually, last point here, if you are confident in the quality of your dandelions you may have in your yard and you have a lot of them, still don't harvest all of them. This kind of veers into a completely different topic on its own, But bees are not doing so hot in today's economy. You think people are suffering? Try talking to the bees. They're definitely declining in their numbers, so you want to leave plenty of pollinating flowers for these bees. If you do want to harvest your dandelions in full, like if you don't have that many, make sure you just have something else out there to replace what the bees could be missing. You know, put a big flower bush, or grow a little garden bed that has some pollinator-friendly plants in it, or just get your tea online from an ethically sourced production company. There's definitely some caveats in here that make herbalism a little difficult, but it's only difficult if you actually care about where it's coming from. You have full choice to not care about how you're sourcing your things, but I am here to tell you that it is more important than it seems. So these herbs and such are great options for you and your health, but you have to recognize that it's also good for our planet's health and other ecosystems. And the bees are within our ecosystem. They're the only reason we have these plants to begin with. So dandelions are amazing. Let's just make sure we're taking care of the ecosystem as a whole. Overall, dandelions could be a great option for you and your health, especially if you're trying to get rid of coffee. It won't give you the caffeine kick, but roasted dandelion coffees are very common. They're usually mixed with chicory, which is really great. It has a lot of the chicoraic acid and caffeic acid and stuff as well. So it's kind of like a superfood coffee, and it tastes great. The one that I get tastes really great. I don't know. It's on Amazon, again. This whole thing just goes to show that weeds are more important than we give it credit for. This is the theme in herbology, is that yes, it's been popular since ancient times. Herbalism has been around for so long, and yet today we spray all these important plants and kill them, and we don't want them because I don't know, I think they're pretty, but a lot of people think that they don't belong where they're growing. And I would argue that they belong wherever they decide to grow. So I implore you to look into the information I put below, and definitely try something new when it comes to your tea systems, and don't reject this plant because you know it is a common weed. It might be more useful than you think.
Thank you everyone for tuning in. We had so much fun creating this episode, and we hope you enjoy it as much as we do.
If you'd like to learn more, follow us on Instagram at studentsparks.ep, where we'll post all kinds of information and episode updates.
Don't forget to check in every other week to learn more about what it is like to be a student of neuroscience
And naturopathy.